Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Gilliland. I'm one of the founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks, and I'm here with Gabby Martin, and we're going to discuss the fourth and fifth parts to Crisis on Infinite Earths from the CW superhero shows, which, let's be honest, we all love those for different reasons. This episode is brought to you by Unlock Stories. I had the great privilege of writing one of the chapters in that book, which is an anthology story series about a smartphone that gets lost and found, and each protagonist interacting with a different app. My app is the Veil, and it gives the user the ability to send text messages with the dead. I had a lot of fun creating it, and it's available on Amazon and Apple Books. And if you want to check it out, please do. Had a lot of fun with that project and did it with a good friend I grew up with. So with that, Gabby, how are you doing?
I am okay. I am still kind of absorbing Crisis and kind of not sure where I stand on some of the decisions that were made. But yeah, ready to talk about Crisis and how it ended.
So we can talk about what might be therapy for both of us at the end. So we both need a support corgi that might. We can talk about that because I did reread the comic beforehand, so I do have some strong feelings. But let's talk about the legal analysis because people like us because we're lawyers. So point one, let's talk about the monitor's liability for creating the anti-monitor. And this differs from the comic. And we'll talk about how that differs after we do some of the legal analysis. But it's 10,000 years ago on his home planet with his wife, and they're doing an experiment so he can go back to the dawn of time. And by doing that, he creates the anti-monitor so it's in his own image. So that raises experiment liability of you do an experiment, something goes wrong, what's your legal risk for doing that? And Gabby, what's your thoughts on the monitor creating the anti-monitor?
Yeah, that was an interesting take because it's, we had talked about before how Pariah slash Nash had created, had let the anti-monitor out and like what his ramifications for that were. But this is really creating the problem. What Nash did was just kind of uncap the bottle. So there's the idea of whether this problem was reasonably foreseeable. And so did Marnovu slash the monitor, could he reasonably foresee that going back to the dawn of time or attempting to go back to the dawn of time would create this problem where he'd get sucked into this kind of like antimatter universe and create the antimatter or the anti-monitor. And so determining whether a defendant breached his duty of care and by acting below the standard of care, the court has to determine whether the risk was foreseeable, which I did a whole kind of dive into Paul's graph and reliving Paul's graph, which was a lot of fun for me. But if it is unreasonable to see
safe place, it's okay.
yeah. No, it's actually, if you have not seen the Lego reenactment of Paul's graph, every law student, every lawyer should go see it on YouTube. It's brilliant. It's cinematic excellence, and everyone should watch it. But reasonable foreseeability is kind of a broad term. So the risk doesn't have to be probable or likely to occur. The probability question is applied later. An unlikely risk, which I think this is what you have here, is an unlikely risk can still be foreseeable. They kind of knew that something bad was going to happen. I mean, you're going back to the dawn of time. You don't know what's there. They didn't seem to be very aware of, kind of the dawn of time. It's not like, in Doctor Who, where you see the Doctor go back to the Stone Age or the dawn of time, and it's very kind of like concrete. They seem to be going to this like before the infinitude type of thing. And his wife even tells him that she alerts him to that there's this possibility that he has to retreat, and he doesn't. So he knows that there's this risk of something bad happening, and he still goes through with it. So I think that the risk, whether he could specifically foresee this whole anti-monitor being created and antimatter universe, probably not likely, but the likelihood is that that something going wrong was a foreseeable risk.
Yeah, and apparently this society doesn't have time travel stories where things go sideways when you kill a butterfly and suddenly the Fourth Reich is now running the world. Like, they didn't have that moral story. It's
Yeah.
like, sure, let's go back to the dawn of creation and hope we don't make any boo-boos that could alter reality as we know it. So
also, my question was like, what was the point of going back to the dawn of time? Was it just to like say that you could, or it seemed very ambiguous what their goal was in going back to the dawn of time. It just seemed, because it seemed like they were well versed in time travel. It just seemed that particular point, and that may have been a plot hole, that they were just like, we have to have him go back to the dawn of time. But yeah, it seemed like, what else were you going to accomplish but create problems?
In part, it's inspired by the comics, and this is where there's differences. So in the comic, when we can talk a little bit more about this, it's, Krona on Oa, is doing his experiment so he can see the creation moment. And Pariah on his Earth also does that, and that's what alerts the anti-monitor to the existence of Earth in Pariah's case, which ended badly for his entire Earth. And what they did in the CW was they merged Krona's experiment and Pariah's experiment, and instead of that creating instead of Krona creating both the monitor and the anti-monitor, it's the monitor basically pulling from both experiments, creating the anti-monitor. And that was just, again, for the comic purist, it's like, it's very easy for comic book guy to go off the cliff going like, well, that's different and I don't like it. On the flip side, it's like, I understand why they did it, but I just wish it was different somehow, because I'm not opposed to it being different because of budgetary constraints or because of, we don't have Green Lantern and Oa in the CW shows. Like, we don't, and that would have been helpful. And the way they changed Pariah's origin also kind of eliminated that possibility. So they just kind of fused everything into the monitor, which from a budgetary point of view and having 5 episodes as opposed to a 12-month series, I completely get. But it did leave me feeling hollow. And it was just like, I wish they had just done that differently. On the flip side, going back to the legal analysis, I think there's a good argument that this is an ultra hazardous activity. So we're not even dealing with the realm of negligence, that there's strict liability here, that this, something so dangerous. And the traditional example is, the guy who decides, I'm going to get rid of the tree stump in my backyard with dynamite. And when they use the dynamite, the tree stump goes ballistic and then lands on the neighbor's car and crushes it, or crashes through the house. Well, the court case is going to be real quick on that. It's like, that's all on you, dude. All on you. And I think there's a good argument with, you went back to the dawn of time. That's an ultra hazardous activity. All the damages are strict liability.
Yeah, because I think there's something to be said of you are messing with the creation of the earth. It's not, it's kind of more severe than just kind of a butterfly effect. It's like you are going to where everything started, and your mere presence there could create a problem. So the fact that you not only go, but also start looking around and don't leave immediately, that's, you know, you're there to create problems. Like there's no reason to be there. So by messing with the creation of time in any way, I mean, the factors that a court would look at is the relative possibility of harm. Well, yeah, if you step back, you're going to be messing with the creation of time. You know, the level of seriousness, the entire fabric of the universe could be changed. And this one's interesting. The level of activity, most people would not regularly engage in ultra hazardous activity. Well, yeah, no kidding. Most people aren't going back to the dawn of time. Like that's just off limits territory. It's like we'll go back to the cavemen, but we won't go back to the dawn of time. And you know, whether the risk outweighs the activity outweighs its social value. What they never explained why they were there. What social value did they have by going back to the dawn of time?
It's his towering ambition, which is why his wife found him attractive. He's like, no.
So, and then, you know, the court would also look at the inappropriateness of the activity in the area where it's engaged, i.e., taking down a tree with dynamite or going back to the dawn of time. Like both of those activities are relatively inappropriate.
And this was also different from the comics because, like, you know, Chrono, like, basically opens a window. So, like, he doesn't go to the creation moment. He's trying to see the creation moment. Yeah. And Pariah's kind of the same. So, like, they're not trying to become an active participant in the creation moment. They're trying to learn. Like, so it's like, it's a educational, scientific, you know, experiment to figure out how did, you know, existence begin, as opposed to I'm going to set foot there and see what happens.
It's like, hold my beer. Let's see what happens.
What could go wrong, go wrong, go wrong, go wrong. Yeah. So, well, apparently a lot.
Yeah.
And again, they mixed all...
he's an idiot in whatever universe he exists in, because he still creates the anti-monitor, which I thought was the lamest waste of screen time for them to go do this whole expedition to convince him not to do it. And then it's like, poof, and he's like, he has towering ambition wherever he is. So I just found a different one.
Yeah, which again, difference with the comics. Oa only existed in the Earth 1 universe because of, you know, the experiment that inadvertently created the multiverse. So there was only one choke point. So in the comics, when they do like the two-part mission to stop the experiment, it's all the supervillains going to Oa, you know, X millennia ago to try to stop it. And unfortunately, when they're taking on the race that would become the Guardians of the Universe, it doesn't go well because they're quickly stopped because they take on a power set way beyond their own, and they're incapacitated. So yeah, it doesn't work when there's a multiverse, and unless you're going to go stop all of the multiverse in order to stop that ignition from happening. On the flip side, if that was the one spot, there's the choke point and you can stop it. It doesn't work when there's infinite choke points because that means there are no choke points. So it's part of the reason why I really didn't care for the 4th episode except for the end. But let's talk about Ollie having his, you know, deal with the monitor, which was to save Barry and Kara in last year's crossover event, where the monitor's just being a jerk. And again, he didn't, again, just different than the comics. Because there's a difference between being cold and just this mercenary with like, hey, let's go cause all these problems in order to thin the herd to find the right heroes to save the day. It's like, really? That's
like, I'm just going to be a jerk to test you guys. because that's what I do.
And I don't know if this is like a Gen Z thing, like for storytelling purposes, or what this is supposed to represent. But again, I didn't care for that from a storytelling perspective. But let's talk about the fact that Oliver had to deal with the Monitor in order to save Barry and Kara from certain death, and the situation the Monitor created with the Book of Destiny. Whew, comics. And him running around doing all of his little missions for the Monitor. So what are, help us understand this binding contract issue.
Yeah, this so-called devil's bargain that Barry calls it. He's like, Oliver, why did you make a devil's bargain with the Monitor? I was like, who uses that language, first of all? But yeah, so the way back in Elseworlds, the last year's crossover, Barry and Kara are set to die, and Oliver's goes on a confrontation mission to the Monitor, and he says that's not happening. Like, you can't kill off these heroes of hope. And so the Monitor tells him that balance has to be maintained, that you can't just like ask me to do something and not have something given in return. So he actually says one change requires another, and how do you propose I keep the balance? So initially, the deal that we see in Arrow, when the Monitor comes to collect Oliver, the deal that was struck was that Oliver would give whatever the multiverse required for the multiverse to survive the looming crisis. And so it's not till that particular episode that the Monitor's like, yeah, by the way, that means you have to die to save everybody else. So the deal there, so it depends on how you look at it. You could kind of see Oliver's exchange as a counteroffer, but it's also a contract. Whether you consider Oliver's request a counteroffer, it's an offer. Oliver is requesting that the Monitor give him something. He's giving something in exchange for something. That's what a contract boils down to, is something in exchange for something. And so the Monitor gives him the magical arrow to save Barry and Kara and destroy the Book of Destiny, or somehow diffuse it. And then Oliver gives him his life in exchange. And so it's a promise in exchange for a promise. And I think it's definitely a binding contract, because the Monitor performed his side of the contract. And then when the Monitor comes to collect Oliver, he has to perform on the promise, or else he's in breach of the contract.
Yeah, it's weird. Let's look at the issue of when we see Earth Prime. So Earths 1 and 38 have merged, which will make, and whatever Earth Black Lightning was on. So 3 Earths have merged together.
They're like, we're making the crossovers easier.
Exactly. In the comics, the multiverse was completely destroyed, and there was only one Earth left, that everything was merged into one. So again, that's different because we still have a multiverse left. It's just the one with the heroes that we will see on the CW are now easier to see, and people can go visit. And
they've clearly forgotten about this whole other multiverse that came back into existence. So they think they're the only ones.
Anyway, so we have Lex Luthor rewrites himself as like a nice guy, and it's like he did bad things, really bad things. So is that destruction of evidence to rewrite yourself in a new reality as the hero as opposed to the villain? And well, if nobody knows him as the villain except for the surviving Paragons, it's not destruction of evidence because it's an entirely new world.
Mm-hmm.
There is an interesting issue with the DEO being a subsidiary of LexCorp, because that's now a weird government private enterprise.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's technically destruction of evidence because it's a new universe.
Yeah.
So we can move on from the issue of spoliation. But I do see Supergirl having some problems with this because she
Yeah.
was clearly not a happy camper.
No.
Uh,
I think
now
it's
we
interesting how it combines with him rewriting himself as the paragon of truth, as opposed to honor or whatever. That this is his truth now. So I think there's an interesting kind of theory about that, and this is who he truly wanted to be.
for humanity, and again, if they take one of the greatest supervillains of all time off the table as, hey, I just go around helping people who are starving now. Okay, thanks. Just ignore you murdering all those people. Sure, whatever. We then have which was my favorite part of this entire series, where we have Supergirl confronting the Weather Witch, and the issue of, is she a state actor because she comes flying out from the DEO to take on a lowly criminal. So does that federal jurisdiction doesn't make her appearance fighting the Weather Witch, does that make her a state actor?
Mm-hmm.
And what are your thoughts on, is she a state actor while doing this?
I don't know, because especially I'm not super caught up on Supergirl, but the DEA seems to like flip-flop back and forth from a private agency to a government agency to a private agency to a government agency, and now it's kind of unclear what it is, because it's a LexCorp subsidiary in Earth Prime. And so is it now a fully private corporation that's being kind of contracted by the government? Is she now a LexCorp employee? Because what is it? Alex refers to Lex as the boss, right? So Lex is obviously signing her paychecks. Hopefully, we're hoping that Kara gets paid by the DEA. That so yeah, it's interesting. To think, because I tend to think that it's now completely a private actor as opposed to a government agency, but I think we're going to have to see where Supergirl goes with it.
And one way, it's the analysis is flipped, so it's kind of hard to come up with a straight answer here. But the Department of Defense will have contractors, whether it's people from Lockheed working on things like my paternal grandfather was on the Poseidon and Polaris missile programs for a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And he was with Lockheed, so he was with the Navy working on these missiles that were supposed to did go into our ballistic missile submarines. So the idea of it's still a government project,
Mm-hmm.
and they got guys from Lockheed running around as the techs and the engineers making the missiles work.
Yeah.
That could be, if it's the government agency on top, it's still a government agency.
Mm-hmm.
If it's the private, company on top, and the government is the subsidiary of it, that's different. That's really different. And it's sure, we have contractors doing military service in faraway places, but they're not state actors when they do that. They're, and it's apparently from the International Spy podcast, the way that they, people took out Boca Raton, who were, the people kidnapping the girls and, and doing horrible things, that they were basically private mercenaries that took care of that.
Yeah.
That way they didn't have to be subject to things like the Geneva Convention. I still have problems with that, because we shouldn't just have mercenaries go out and take care of bad guys, because that's what governments do. But it's this will probably be a point of contention in future Supergirl episodes.
Yeah.
Now, why it's my favorite part of this series was the fact that we have Flash and Supergirl together, and we have Marv Wolfman, who wrote Crisis on Infinite Earths, who killed off both of those characters in that maxi series, look sweet and adorable and get their autographs. And like, just again, the comic book nerd, I was like, bravo, bravo. And the way that, you know, those actors are as people, it's like, you can just tell like they were really enjoying it. And it was a nice scene. But let's go to our favorite Martian, who's going around helping people remember, and it's not fun.
No.
Going like, hey, this is what happened, for those of you who didn't know what had happened here. And do you think that's battery?
I do think that was what I thought immediately when I saw what he was doing, especially we don't see what he does to, we don't see his every interaction, but when he goes up to Ray Palmer, he just like puts his hand on his head. It's like, there's no, do I have permission to touch you? Like, this is what's going to happen. He's just like there and forcing memories on him. So I definitely think that, especially those that got severe headaches and possibly brain injuries from being forced to remember all of this, could have a case of and it should be noted that we're talking about the civil tort of battery, not any sort of criminal action. But the civil tort of battery is an intentional tort. And there's 3 elements to it. You need intent, which is not necessarily criminal intent, but it's intent to cause the act. So did John intend to put his hand on these people's heads and force the memories on them? Yeah, that was his point. And then there's contact, which is non-consensual contact with the individual. Yeah, there's a lot of, he never waits to get that permission, right? He never waits to get that consent. He's just like, here's the memories, bah! And so there's the contact element, and then there's harm. So this could be physical, mental, emotional harm, which we don't know the brain side effects of being, overlodged with all of these memories, because I tend to think that, the Paragons have their own memories, right? They remember, they kind of got placed in Earth Prime, Oliver dies, they get placed in Earth Prime, like it's a continual timeline. Whereas everybody else who has these memories forced upon them, they have memories of Earth 2 or Earth Prime from the beginning. And now they're being forced with this parallel memory of what happened, what you lived through didn't actually happen. Technically, the Earth restarted today. And so that has to cause not just brain damage. I mean, we hear several of them say that they have headaches. It has to cause some sort of a mental, emotional distress. To your life is a lie. This was all fake until like right now. So I definitely think they should be going after. I mean, I love John as much as anybody else, but I really think they should be recovering for battery.
Possibly because he's having a rough morning and he's like, I'm tired of explaining, and does the here, let me catch you up. And like, oh, okay, well, now I'm having a bad day too.
Yeah.
So then we get,
we'll all have a bad day together.
Yeah, will be shared. So we then have, the side story, with Sargon the sorcerer, who's using B-boat for vandalism. And the giant creature going around destroying private property, that's vandalism. I mean, that's classic vandalism. And what gets a little weird is whatever the sorcerer is stealing from, because there's a big vault and that could be a bank, but when he steps out of the vault, it doesn't look like a bank.
It
And
looks
it's
like an
like,
old school kind of bank.
yeah, yeah, and again, this filmed up in Vancouver, so maybe that's what a bank looks like there. But I don't. I mean, again, I've spent time in Vancouver. I really do like British Columbia, but I didn't hit any banks while I was there. I did find a good comic book store.
I think it's a bank. I immediately saw it and I thought like the door was going to open behind Sarah and Barry with like some dudes with Tommy guns and, you know, hats and stuff. So that's what I envisioned. It's like, this is an old school, like hold up bank type thing. So yeah, I never doubted it was a bank. It looks a bit like a hotel, but there's no like teller windows, but yeah.
So let's get into like what we liked and didn't like about these last two episodes. And Gabby, what worked for you and what didn't work for you?
I'll start with what didn't work for me. I by episode whatever 4 and 5, I was sick of the crossover references. I was done. I had the lag time to get back to reality, and coming back, I was like, stop calling. Nobody would call a team up a crossover. That just doesn't happen. It's not proper vernacular. Like, it's just weird. It's super meta. It bothered me a lot. The other thing that bothered me a lot was that whole shouting for Oliver. I thought that was incredibly hokey, especially given the varying relationships that those individuals had to Oliver. I think it was just very lame. But the one thing I did like, and I have liked about the Arrowverse in general, is their ability to demonstrate and really showcase superhero relationships, that the relationships between the superheroes, in a way that you truly don't get in the DCU, the film universe. I don't think you really got in any significant capacity in Smallville. And it's just, and you're obviously not going to, you have some of it in the MCU, but I think there's, thinking back to like the animated series of the Justice League and that kind of stuff, you really see in the DC, the Justice League is such a tight-knit group, and it's so historical, and just the relationships between them. And I think that one thing the Arrowverse has done incredibly successfully is the relationship between Green Arrow and the Flash, that it was believable that they were, mentor, mentee, friends, almost brothers, that, that strong bond was so, because it's played out for so long. And then when he was like, when he asks him, are you Oliver? Because he asks him if he trusts him, and he says, are you Oliver Queen? And he says, yes. And he says, with every cell in my body. And that, I was just like, that is what I've been waiting to see on screen. That is what we got in the animated series. That's what we get in the comic books. And now we have it like on television. And that was great for me.
Good points. So I really didn't like the 4th episode because it deviated from the comic book really significantly.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have everyone off the vanishing point. There's the run through the Speed Force and people are lost. And it's the touchy-feely crap that I hate about the CW shows. That's like, this is wasting time. Like, stop it. And, like there were story points that you could have done, but you have to make it a group hug. And like, I can't stand that. And I know it's a CW thing, and there are people who do like that, but because they chose to do that creative choice really made the Monitor look like an idiot, because in the comic, he knew Harbinger was going to kill him. And so he had the plan with his tuning forks on the remaining Earths that his death would power those tuning forks and save Earths 1 and 2. And Harbinger, being really upset about what she did in killing, her father figure who raised her, she does a giant power play saving the other remaining Earths, pulling them into this microverse that the Monitor had. That's all left as a chalk outline on the floor. So the Monitor's a moron who had no game plan to save the universe, knowing that he was going to be murdered. And Harbinger has no redemptive arc. We next see her sitting on the couch with her husband. That was lame. And so there's zero redemptive arc for her. So like that really bothered me. They could have incorporated those elements from Crisis. And again, I understand maybe there was a time limit, but wasting time in the Vanishing Point and then the touchy-feely crap of running through the Speed Force, that those were just missed opportunities, and that bothered me. The fight at the dawn of time, like, okay, that was fine. Like, and because again, in the comics, it's the Spectre taking on the Anti-Monitor, and that's what basically restarts the universe, and where we see everyone then wake up, and it's, the Earths are fused. Now, the other thing that bothered me was having Lex Luthor be there at all. I mean, like, that just irritated the hell out of me. Because in the comics, you have Superman 2 from Earth 2. And in our case, this would be, 96. And he's mission critical. And when he wakes up and goes to work at the Daily Planet, and he quickly realizes that it's Earth's one's Daily Planet, and nobody remembers his existence. And so his wife, his Earth are gone, and he does not take that well. And there's a great scene between the two Supermen, with the Superman of Earth 1 talking down the Superman of Earth 2. So again, missed opportunity there. I thought the waking up with the combined Earth, like, that worked. I mean, like, that did happen in the comic, but I do feel there were some missed opportunities. The final fight with the Monitor in the comic is better than what they did on screen. Yeah. And in the comic, they're in the antimatter universe, because the Alex Luthor, which again doesn't exist in this series, and it would have been great if he had been, because that would have given them other options. He helps open that portal, and they do this final assault with, like, it's the two Supermen, it's Wonder Woman for Earth 2, and they go take on the Anti-Monitor. And as the portal is closing, it's Superman from Earth 2 decides, I'm going to stop this. And it's Superboy who also sticks around. So it's so the people who are the last line of defense, it's Alex Luthor, it's Superboy, and it's the original Superman, from the 1930s, the original. And it's him breaking out the whoop-ass lamp, taking on the Anti-Monitor, and it is glorious. It's a glorious slugfest, and he does punch the Anti-Monitor into a star in the antimatter universe, and the Anti-Monitor comes out of it with Superman, I will not die until you die. So, I mean, like, it is all of reality on the line, and it's the first hero in this massive fight. And it does have a happy ending, because it's Alex Luthor, and it's actually Darkseid firing power through Alex Luthor in order to help knock the Anti-Monitor back. And it's Alex Luthor who actually created a pocket universe, saving the original Lois. And they all go through that pocket universe, and we don't see them for a long, long time. So in my view, the final battle, again, it's constrained by TV. So it's a TV budget. So the fact they're in a parking lot
Were they
all
in a
the
parking lot or a pier? It looked like a
yeah,
pier to me.
it's yeah, and probably it was because you can look like that going onto a pier. Uh, all the humans should have been killed in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So
I
it's like,
I love Diggle is because I think Alex and Wild Dog both have two guns, but Diggle's fucking walking in there with just one pistol, and I think it's great. I think I was just like, yep, this dude doesn't have anything but one pistol against these shadow demons. Like, I support it. I support that level of confidence.
yeah, it's great. And at what point do you call in the army? Because the army could really be helpful in fighting the shadow demons. So the armed forces should be engaged in this battle as well. But taking in the comics, taking on the anti-monitor was like you send in every heavy hitter. Well, in this Arrowverse, the heavy hitters are Superman, Supergirl, Martian Manhunter, maybe Adam, but that's it. The others should have been killed in a heartbeat, except for Flash, who could outrun it. So just that last fight kind of bothered me until the anti-monitor grew. And then it was just the heavy hitters taking him on.
Yeah.
Because the others realized, oh, we don't belong here. Like we'll go fight some shadow demons. The Kryptonians and the Martian can handle this. We're out.
Yeah.
They had to defeat him using TV tech, basically. And the comic universe that's been created through the Arrowverse is not the same as, the DC universe in 1985. So like I accept there are some things that have to be different. But the fact that Harbinger is just sidelined and there's no redemption for her bothered me, and that the Monitor had no plan to save the day bothered me, and Luthor annoyed me, and and again, while we all focus on love and everything that we think about to restart the universe, it's like, stop it, that doesn't need to happen. So again, I do have mixed feelings, but this is a TV.
I'm the same. I mean, the final battle kind of frustrated me because if you look at that battle and the battle in Elseworlds and the battle in the crossover before that, like from the battle that from the crossover they brought Supergirl in, it looks like they keep finding an empty lot in Vancouver and shooting it. Like, it's the same fight. They just change what they're fighting, the CGI character they're fighting, and it's quite frustrating to me. Because this was supposed to be the big battle, and you really didn't get that. And so I think that kind of drove me a little nuts. And the other thing that frustrated me, and I didn't find this out until after I had watched it, is the fact that they kind of concluded the Arrowverse, or the Oliver Queen story, in the way they did. That they finalized it in Elseworlds, and they're using the final 2 episodes as a backdoor pilot. I think, to me, that cheapens everything the show has done. Instead of, that this main character got his send-off in a crossover, as opposed to a send-off on his own show, on his own time, in his own storyline. I was crying, especially because it was just kind of like, oh, we made the statue for him, like, yay, he got a shout out from the president, yay. Like, it felt very cheap to me, and it felt very like, why did I put 8 seasons into this if this was going to be the result? So that frustrated me a lot, because I was like, CW has the money to put on a separate pilot. They don't have to make a backdoor pilot for a spinoff. I mean, their pilots are always successful. They don't have to do that way, and it's quite frustrating and annoying to me.
Well, and there was just too much talking. It's like, okay, we now have a president who's giving a speech. Thank you for outing Oliver Queen in a
Again.
way that, yeah, in a way that could harm everyone that he loves.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
Because others who, it's like, people could figure out Dingle from there. So it's like,
Yeah.
thanks. Um, don't do that. And then we have other eulogies again in the, the Hall of Justice, and like in that, it's like, stop beating the horse. Like, you dropped action in order for people to talk more. And while I did, again, being someone who was a child at the end of the 70s, I did watch the Super Friends, and I did appreciate the music. I did appreciate, the set and having the table. But there's a lot of time just sitting around that table, and it's like, they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not like a meal comes out or anything like that. So again, that was just like, they were just having nostalgia for the sake of nostalgia.
Yeah.
And
they have this random like fire pit slash monument
arrow
in the middle of a hangar. It's very strange.
On the flip side, I'll probably start watching Black Lightning now, because I did enjoy that character. And the dialogue with just how often does the Earth get threatened? And everyone kind of looks down and it's like, oh, it's like
that
worked. Yeah. Oh, okay.
I mean, honestly, Black Lightning's eulogy was the best, where he leans over to Barry and he's like, I never met Oliver, but he seems like a good dude. And I was like, that's all you needed. That's all you needed.
Yep. And we're done, and
conclusion.
So again, just tighten up the writing. You had Oliver, and throughout the season, talk to the monitor in what looks like the space platform. That could have been, that's what the fight with the anti-monitor could have looked like, at least.
Yeah.
And you send in the strike team to take them on.
Yeah.
But it's not what they did. So again, I'm grateful for what we had.
What are your feelings on the use of the catchphrase by Oliver in fighting the anti-monitor?
I didn't forced. Again, it's just, absolutely. You have no. I groaned when you have filled the universe. Stop it. Like, that worked when you were murdering, criminals. It doesn't work now. And I mean, I appreciate the fact that they had him become the Spectre in order to give him a big ticket, send off, because an Arrowverse, the anti-monitor, is not going to end well.
But it wasn't even that much of a big ticket send off. It was very kind of late. I think they could have made him the Spectre and then concluded him as the Spectre in his own storyline. Like that, I think would have been better than what we got.
Well, that, and in the Green Lantern comic, and this goes back a ways, that Hal Jordan dies, reigniting the sun, and he turns into the Spectre. And they have years of stories with him appearing as the Spectre. They could have done something like that. So they were limited by the number of characters that they had, because in the comic Crisis, there are other characters who are involved in saving the day. And those characters aren't in the Arrowverse. We don't have the Golden Age Green Lantern with the magic green ring, nor all the sorcerers working together to get all the shadow demons off the earth. Like, there's just stuff that, because in the comic at the end, Earth gets pulled into the antimatter universe. And so it's about getting the Earth out of the antimatter universe and fighting to save the day. Yeah, they didn't do that. So it's just, so again, just, I don't want to be angry comic book guy, but I am a little right now, because they took the source material, and some of it was a chef's kiss of healthy nostalgia. And then there was just like a lot of wimping out. On the flip side, having the movie Flash appear, like, okay, that was nice fan service. Like that worked for me, and like both of them, like, oh wow, this seems breathable. Oh, this seems safe. Like, okay, like they totally get being Barry, and they did a good job of Barry's interacting.
Yeah.
And it was very nice. However, uh, uh, I couldn't resist. However, like if that was the only part, that was the only redeeming thing of the Speed Force storyline. um, yeah, I wish it followed a little bit more of the comic, and because they still could have done it, even with the TV budget, they could have used more of the comic elements, and because in the comic, Harbinger like goes from like extreme guilt of like what have I done, and then sucks it up with like I got a plan, and like this is what I'm going to do to save 3 other Earths.
Yeah.
Cool. As opposed to we're going to see her on the couch watching TV. Dude, like that just so rubbed me the wrong way. But again, I'm not going to fault them for the budget that they have and the limitations that they had. Maybe if this had been like 7 or 8 episodes, they could have done more. But I think they probably could have pulled it off with 7. And if they had completely reworked the 4th episode, it could have been different. It could have been different. But there was just too much talking. Now, the one positive, I do adore Supergirl just because the way the actress can portray like joy, like with like, oh look, Kate's here, and like and just like looking happy, and like Barry looking at her with like, dude, like it's like time and place, or unveiling the table at the end. Again, the look of pure joy, like the look that like free ice cream, like she does that so well.
And I think that was the acting of Melissa Benoist and Grant Gustin in the crossover. I think they're just so perfect. I mean, that last scene of Kara looking so overjoyed and Barry looking like he's like, this is so cool, like look what I like, they're such nerds, and they play it so well that they're like these little kids that got superpowers, and I think they do such a good job. I thought that particular moment of I could have done without everybody else, but like just the 2 of them interacting in that last scene was very on point.
Yep. And Superman would have known he had a second kid. Like he wasn't at the done of that. It's just he would have remembered that because he wasn't there at the reset. So
that was very confusing.
Yeah, I was just like, he would know. He would have gotten that memo.
It's not like she went to a shelter and like randomly adopted a second kid without him knowing.
Surprise! Yeah, she's not Cindy McCain bringing home a kid from Bangladesh. Surprise! And for the record, Cindy did the right thing. I stand with Cindy. But yeah, again, really mixed feelings. And it's because I'm 45. I grew up reading comics. And the fact that we have, 5 different comic book TV shows on, no, is it 6? On the CW. That's awesome.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Never thought I would see that in my lifetime. And the majority of them are good. So, again, I am grateful. I was grateful to see Marv Wolfman. I wish some things had been written differently.
Yeah. But I think that's like an overarching problem with the CW. I mean, you kind of saw it in nowhere more significantly than the shift of Supergirl from CBS to CW. The writing just shifted significantly, and And I think that's just what happens when you have a network that's geared towards teenagers and young adults. The writing is going to be kind of dramatic, and clearly it's working for them. Like, you know, they clearly have a format and it works, and so why mess, you know, with something that's not broken? So, you know, but it's good overall to get the kind of quality superhero stuff we're getting that we're definitely not getting from the DC universe on screen right now.
No, no.
Except for Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is good.
Yeah.
Love Wonder Woman.
Well, again, Patty Jenkins out obviously loves and cares and about the character and the source material, and like it works. It's amazing what happens when you go, so what are the core elements of this character? Let's make a movie focused on that. Okay. So will Wonder Woman need to snap anyone's neck? Not. She did that to Max Lord, so maybe, yeah, but like that's not a norm for her. Certainly not a norm for Superman. So yeah, I digress. So with that, I'm grateful for having this. I just wish it had been a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, we do get lots of legal analysis. Yeah, good times. And you know what? I did like, Rory, going by Rebecca and writing romance novels, and him interacting with Killer Frost. Like that was, again, like just like the snarky interplay between the actors, they do that well.
Yes.
So more of that, please. Yes. So with that, everyone, thank you for tuning in. We definitely will have more. And Gabby, thank you for your time this evening. And everyone, stay geeky, America.